Well, we got a new dog in town, and he's a big dog. Pathfinder's Growth Fund. They now have a 5-year track record, which is the first quarter they have had it.
And they've beaten Milford.
They have beaten Milford.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. That's James Blair. And today we're here to talk about what you should do with your KiwiSaver in 2025.
We're back in your life, and today it is New Zealand's most important retirement vehicle, KiwiSaver.
Property. Oh, yep.
Property.
No.
Mate, it's not productive. Mate, it's just some land, it's some dirt and some sticks.
We're going to preface all of this with a big fat, you should not be making decisions based on the short term. You should not be trading your KiwiSaver like they're Pokemon cards. You should be setting these things for the long term. Deep reference, I know. But Jimmy,
do you know what'd be wild? Sorry, I was just thinking, imagine if you could invest your KiwiSaver into Pokemon cards.
Like alternative assets.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
Surely there's, not in KiwiSaver. There must be something out there.
All right, the Lighthouse KiwiSaver is coming in 2025 for all you Pokemon lovers.
Pokemon cards.
Be so much fun.
Yeah. No, so I mean, the other thing to remember though is, let's say, who's this podcast for? This one's really for, let's say you signed up to KiwiSaver. Your bank was like, oh yeah, give it to us. You went into a default fund and you never thought about it, even though you're contributing to it. That's you over there. Now, you should be going, hey, maybe I should make an active choice about my KiwiSaver. And that's really what we're saying here. What should you be thinking about in 2025 if you're making an active choice about your KiwiSaver? Jimmy, my investment guru. Hit them with the facts.
Cool. So there's a few different things. One is, are we making any money? If we are with a KiwiSaver provider, like, I don't know, say with the biggest bank in the country, and they're like, I don't know, the second worst KiwiSaver provider out of the 20 KiwiSaver providers, we need to sort that out. Fees. What are we getting for our fees? I'm not necessarily just about low cost, but does it align with your values? Does it make sense? Socially responsible. Is this something that is important to me? What might be another one? Access to financial advice, let's say. If you want access to a financial advisor, the way they communicate, all those sort of things. So there are lots of different providers. What we're going to talk about is there is a report that comes out once a quarter. We will put it in the comment section or in the show notes so you can find it, where it ranks all KiwiSaver providers in the market. And then we're also going to talk about what each of them do in terms of their investing style.
Cool. So we're going to start with some growth fund. Now, Jimmy, give me a quick rundown on what a growth fund is for the layman's out there.
So we've got 80% in growth assets, which are higher risk, shares, property, overseas, locally, invest into many, many companies, and 20% in lower risk assets like cash and bonds. So this will drop in value over time. You will see negative returns when something bad happens in the world. Yep. You can't flip out. You got to think long term, but you'll end up with more money over the long term.
So a growth fund. Now, again, these aren't for everyone. You get more risk, but more growth over the long term is the equation. So, James, who has been the top performing growth funds for KiwiSaver the last 5 years?
Well, we got a new dog in town, and he's a big dog. Pathfinder's Growth Fund. They now have a 5-year track record, which is the first quarter they have had it.
And they've beaten Milford.
They have beaten Milford. 10.1% per annum, which is a pretty good number. Now, there is a few interesting things about Pathfinder. One is I would probably now rank them as the most socially responsible KiwiSaver provider out in the market that has a decent enough track record in terms of performance. The other component is that they're an active fund manager. Yep. So they're not just investing into a passive strategy. I think it's quite hard to be a passive KiwiSaver provider and hit the socially responsible mark. You could argue Simplicity does some things in that area. We're going to have Sam Stubbs back on the podcast.
You could argue that they're kind of active anyway, though.
I was just about to say that the bits that are socially responsible are active.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to Pathfinder, they do invest into some really interesting companies. Mike, do you want to give us a few examples of where Pathfinder invests?
Yeah. First one, Organo. Now, they're all in the water purification industry. Next one, Sharesies, wealth development platform. ethical, I guess. And then First Solar, it's a company that manufactures solar panels. So all of those go under the heading of ethical investments.
Yep.
Which is obviously, and that's slightly different to socially responsible, yeah? James, can you just break down what is socially responsible versus ethical?
So socially responsible is going things that are bad, we're not going to invest into those areas. So some examples between socially responsible and ethical. Socially responsible is excluding the really bad stuff. So anything that is hurting the planet, anything that is hurting society, like child trafficking, anything along those sort of lines, pornography, alcohol, tobacco. Now, ethical is quite different. And why ethical is very different, you and I will have a different opinion on what is ethical and what is not. A perfect example is, okay, you don't like gambling. What about the pokie machines? Okay, we're not going to invest into the pokie machines. How about the screens that go into the pokie machines? Can we invest into those companies? What about white bread? If a company makes white bread
Chip Sammy
and it's making kids fat, is that ethical or unethical? So that is very difficult to do. So that's why we really focus on the socially responsible
Do you want to
side.
know what my lowest grade at university was? What paper? Ethics and finance.
Anyway, if anyone's looking for a mortgage broker, call Mike. So moving on to number 2 of growth funds, Milford's Active Growth Fund. The thing Milford has that Pathfinder doesn't have is a much longer track record. So if Pathfinder's got 5 years, 5 years is good. Milford's got a track record since KiwiSaver started in 2007. So they are at 9.5% per annum over the past 5 years, so a little bit behind. They invest into the big dogs. Mike, who are some of those companies?
Microsoft, Contact Energy, Coca-Cola, Amazon. So those are really big companies. And you've noticed that not all of them are New Zealand based. They are investing globally as part of their strategy. So, they've come in second. I would argue actually that it is much easier to have a slightly higher return when your track record's only 5 years than it is with someone like Milford, who's been around for a lot longer.
Yep. So the third one is Key Street Growth, which over 5 years has done 8.8% per annum. So that's a really good track record. My problem with Key Street Growth Fund is, who the hell is Key Street?
I don't know. And it's spelled Quay. And every time I see that, I know it's Key, but it looks like Quay. I find it annoying.
No way.
No Quay.
So my problem is, while it's got a great track record, it invests, the top 3 equity holdings are Google, Apple, Microsoft, is as a brand, maybe you go marketing shouldn't come into it, but how much money have they actually got invested in these funds?
Why would that matter?
Because we're talking about our retirement savings
so
and credibility.
Is a larger fund usually better than a smaller fund?
I think for the average person where they're not spending a lot of time thinking about it, I think the credibility of a bigger brand does matter.
Yep.
Saying that, though, to be a hypocrite, when somebody goes, I feel safer with a bank, I think that's a really poor excuse.
Yeah, it is.
Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand operated award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Let's move on to the top aggressive funds. So aggressive funds, very similar to growth funds, except we have a higher allocation towards shares and property. Aggressive though, Mike, I want to talk about this, gets a bad rap because it's like somebody's going to get you. But I think the term high growth fund, probably from a marketing perspective, sounds slightly more wholesome. But really it's just an extra, it's 95% in shares and property instead of 80%.
So out of an aggressive fund over the long term, we should be expecting better returns than a growth fund because they are more risky. Again, it's that risk and return trade-off that you're making. It's really important with both of these that you remember that, if these drop 5%, 10%, 20%, they'll jump around a little bit. You should not be panicking and making decisions. You should be looking for financial advice because I think it was in COVID, we had a lot of money shift out of these high risk, very volatile funds into balanced or cash or conservative funds. after the drop. And that is effectively the wrong time that you should be doing that. You're crystallizing that loss. You're not going to be in the same fund and expect a snapback from an aggressive fund. Let's say if you shifted to balance, you will get less growth during those boom times.
Yeah, so let's move into the top performing aggressive funds over the past 5 years. Milford's aggressive fund, number one, has just hit its 5-year track record. So over the last 5 years, 11.3% per annum. We've already spoken about where they invest. I think we'll move on from Milford. Number two, Booster's socially responsible high growth fund. So they also hit that socially responsible component that we talked about with Pathfinder. They're at 10.1% per annum. They invest in, New Zealand. We're talking Fisher and Paykel Healthcare, Auckland International Airport, Infratil, Meridian, Main Freight, those sort of companies.
Yeah.
My thing with Booster is they are getting sued by the regulator.
Yeah.
And it's to do with conflicts of interest. So the regulator, the Financial Markets Authority, is essentially claiming that they didn't disclose in the right way that they invested into a fund which directors at Booster have ownership in. So conflict of interest. Booster would argue that they did disclose it and it's immaterial for the directors in terms of the percentage of their wealth.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen in the future there? Who knows? I'm still comfortable for my clients who are with Booster to stay with Booster for those where it's the right thing. But I have given all our clients the choice to go, if you weren't comfortable, maybe we look at somebody else.
Are you giving the advice to not just remain in Booster, but to go to Booster?
I'm going to be honest, Mike. Pathfinder has joined our approved product list at Lighthouse.
Yep.
And that is off the back of the kind of the
news around
FMA
Booster.
allegations. The only downside to Pathfinder is at the moment they don't have an aggressive fund. So if we have a client who we think should be an aggressive fund and wants socially responsible, it can't be Pathfinder. It's got to be Booster.
Yeah. Cool. Next one.
The last one's an interesting one. Fisher Funds 2 scheme, which is no longer open to new investors.
They shut the fund.
They have shut the fund. Mike, do you know why somebody might shut a fund?
It's too big and it's too hard to execute the investment strategy because of the size of the fund.
Bang on. So to keep the credibility of the fund and to deliver the same sort of returns, you can't take any new money. That is the argument for somebody like a Milford. As they continue to grow their market share, how can they possibly remain an active fund because they've got so much money to put somewhere?
Yeah. And when I just want to break that down a little bit without getting too technical, just because I find it interesting. Why is it harder to execute the strategy of the fund the more money you get? Surely you go, I just divvy it up along the same lines that we've got and throw it all out into the market, the same investments.
If you find a good opportunity, there's only X percentage of a company that you can buy.
Yeah.
And if you've gone from managing $2 billion to $20 billion, it can be very hard to find a home. And the other piece is you end up really just investing into an index in some respects because the money's got to go somewhere and you just have to
keep it in
split
cash.
it up. Yep.
So we've talked about the aggressive funds there. Let's just bring it back to the listeners though. Let's say I'm looking at aggressive or growth and making these decisions. What are some of the things we should be looking at which isn't just past performance?
So we've talked a little bit about the socially responsible side.
Yep.
So for those where that's important, we've talked about Booster, we've talked about Pathfinder, quite good homes. We've given the options in terms of track records. The ones that's missing in here is the lower cost options. Kernel, Simplicity are the two big ones, and that's because they haven't been around for 5 years.
Yep.
Now, some people go, well, am I comfortable investing into something without a 5-year track record? In this scenario, I think it is completely fine, and that's because we're investing into an index. So the track record of the provider doesn't really matter if we're just tracking a basket of companies opposed to we're paying a higher fee for somebody who goes, I'm going to outperform in the market. That's when their credentials and history becomes really important.
Yeah, cool. And I want to talk about another couple of things just with those track records and risks. There is a fund provider in New Zealand in the KiwiSaver, who operates in the KiwiSaver space, who has a crypto component to their fund. What do you think about that?
I don't have a problem with that, as long as customers understand what they are doing and they really understand. My big problem would be is if Bitcoin moves up and you are advertising returns that are throwing off clients. So they're not going, I want to invest into cryptocurrency. They're going, this fund made 100% return over the past 12 months, which providers have done before and have gotten a lot of trouble. So I would stay away in those situations.
Cool. And when would it make sense for a customer to be switching KiwiSaver funds? Because you don't want to be switching around all the time. You want to set and forget these things.
Yeah, I think so. I think so say, for example, like if I mentioned the booster news and you didn't know about that and you want to review it, that would make a lot of sense. The biggest ones is if you are sitting with a bank, you've got to have a really good think about whether that is the right thing for you. There might be a scenario where staying with a bank's a good idea. I don't know what that scenario might be, but just when you compare track records, it's really clear that most of those people, haven't made an active choice of investing. The other thing is just generally you haven't made a decision on who you want to invest with, or you've followed somebody else's advice without actually getting all the information yourself.
Yeah, so basically, if you haven't made an active choice around your KiwiSaver to start with, or when you made the choice, you might go, oh no, I did pick something. I can't remember quite what it was, but I was 20 when I picked it, and I'm now in my 30s, and you haven't reviewed it, it may be time to sit down and look at it. We're not saying you should switch, but definitely review it to make sure you've got the right risk fund provider.
Yeah, there's a couple other small things as well. Contribution level. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of, if the employer is contributing more than 3% to do that. If you are in a situation where maybe you're not great with your budget, and particularly if you're trying to save for your first home, a higher contribution level might make sense. That's what I did for my brother, and he's got a hell of a lot more money in his KiwiSaver to be able to buy a house.
Cool.
So they are all our tips when it comes to KiwiSaver. There's lots of really good resources out there. There's the Morningstar quarterly report. Sorted does a whole bunch of comparisons. You can jump on any provider's website if you want to find out more about them. And if you want an advisor to give advice to you on your KiwiSaver, jump on the Lighthouse website, click the contact us, a KiwiSaver advisor will reach out. Much love to Partners Life sponsoring this episode. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, give us a review, give us a like. We'll catch you next time.
Cheers.